Om Sadashivasamārambhām Shankarācārya-madhyamām Asmadācārya-paryantāम् Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Welcome back. We're on our third class now, and towards the end of this class, we should be actually entering the text of Tattva Bodha. In the last class, we talked about the different kinds of pramanam that exist, that is being the different sources of knowledge. And we also looked at the 12 main darshanas, viewpoints which exist in India, and how each of these darshanas accept some of the pramanams and the others don't. So we had 6 astika darshanas, which all accept Veda as a source of knowledge. And we had 6 nastika darshanas, non-believers, which do not accept Veda as pramanam. And we spoke about how Advaita Vedanta is the only major darshana which accepts all of the 6 pramanams that we talked about, which was the Pratyaksha pramanam, what is known through your organs of knowledge, your eyes, nose, ears, and so on. Your Anumanam, inference, if you see fire, there is smoke. The Upamana, which was comparison. Arthapati, which was the 2-step inference. And Anupalabdhi, the non-availability of something being a source of knowledge. And finally, Shabda Pramanam or Shastra Pramanam, which is the only thing, which is the only source of knowledge which can tell us about Brahman, which can tell us about this absolute consciousness. And, now we know that because we looked at how the various, for something to be accepted as a source of knowledge, it has to be self-valid by itself. It doesn't need any supporting proof to say it is what it is saying. That's what makes it a pramanam. It is something else. No other source of pramanam should be able to negate what a particular pramanam said, else it becomes an error. Hence, we said that in Shastra pramanam, you will not be able to find any other source which proves what Shastra says. But from time to time, maybe you'll find some supporting evidence, but we do not wait for that or look for that. But the promise is also that no other source of knowledge will be able to negate what Shastra Pramanam says. It will and must satisfy your intellect and your logic also. Then related to Pramanam, there is 2 other terms which go along. You will find in Vedanta, things often come in threes, which is Pramata, that is you, the knower, and Prameyam, what is to be known. So this is a triad of terms. Pramanam, the source of knowledge. Pramata, the one who is the knower. And Prameyam, it is what to be known. So when yoga talks about Nirvikalpa Samadhi, it's when this triad dissolves and there is no division anymore between the knower, the object to be known, and the process of knowing. That's what yoga calls Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And in Advaita Vedanta, we accept that as a very useful means of purifying the mind, of gaining this insight, but that is not what will give us the knowledge of who I am. That knowledge can only be given through Shastra Pramana. But we accept this Samadhi and all the steps in yoga as being very useful in someone's spiritual journey. Right? So similarly, we will talk about a lot of other practices of yoga, which are useful, conducive to someone's spiritual journey. We will talk about Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion. We will talk about Karma Yoga, the path of selfless service. Raja Yoga, which includes meditation and all your asana practices and all these other things. And all these are very necessary and important to purify the mind, to make it ready for you to come to this knowledge and be able to assimilate the knowledge that you're receiving. But it will be Shabda Pramanam, Shastra Pramanam alone, which can actually give you the knowledge which can liberate you. So what are actually, how do you get now this Shabda Pramanam, this knowledge? We have several sources which gives us this knowledge, and different layers of scriptures which talk of this truth, this Tattvam. The very first and original source is called the Vedas, which a term all of you must have heard. Vedas is also known as Shruti. Shruti meaning as was heard. This is because these Vedas are supposed to have been received by the Sapta Rishis, the original great 7 Rishis, in direct transmission while in meditation. Direct transmission from who? You could say direct transmission from Ishvara, or because we're talking about Advaita Vedanta, we're saying there is no duality. You can also understand this as direct transmission from their own higher nature. Does this mean that we can all go into meditation and receive this transmission directly? Unfortunately not. We are told that it was only these original 7 Rishis, the Sapta Rishis, who had the capability to get this transmission. And from then on, the knowledge was passed on through the Guru Shishya Parampara, the lineage of the Guru Shishya. And the original Vedas were all heard. It is as was heard. And they were also transmitted orally for thousands and thousands of years, which is why all the Vedas can, everything in the Vedas is called a mantra, and they can all be chanted. So they are all what we say apurusheya, not a product of human intellect. There is no author of the Shrutis. The Rishis were only the receptors. They just received this knowledge and then recalled what they received. There are 4 Vedas that all of you might have heard of: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda. And they were transmitted orally. Even today, the recommended way to receive this knowledge is through oral transmission. It is always recommended to listen to this knowledge and not read a book or something. So once you receive the knowledge through the lineage, you can then then refer to your notes or go do some other reading a bit later on in your journey. But originally, this knowledge has to come to you through Shravana. Then what is in the Vedas, the last part of the Vedas contain what we call Upanishads. They contain the essential teaching of my true nature. And these are found in the end portion of Vedas. Today, we consider 10 of these Upanishads. They were originally hundreds, and 10, about 110 or so are still known. The rest got a bit lost with time. And 10 of them now we study as a Vedanta student They're called the primary or Mukhya Upanishads, not because they're giving a higher knowledge. All the Upanishads are giving the highest knowledge already, but they are considered the primary because leading acharyas of all these primary schools of Indian darshanas commented on these, including Adi Shankaracharya, who commented on these from the Advaitic Vedanta point of view. And these 10 Upanishads, you don't need to remember the names, are Isha, Kena, Katha, Prashna, Mundaka, Mandukya, Taitriya, Aitriya, Chandokya, and Brihadaranyaka. Right? You will hear these names some point or the other. The recommended way of this study is generally we go through a few of these introductory texts like Tattva Bodha. Where it falls in these layers we will discuss shortly. And then we will go through Bhagavad Gita, and then you do the 10 Upanishads. That's when it will come. Right? The second layer after the Shrutis is called the Smritis, which means as was remembered, as remembered. Now, this is a body of literature which was written by the rishis, and the rishis received this knowledge, understood it, and then remembered this in this literature. And why do we need a secondary literature when the Vedas are already giving us this highest knowledge? It's because the Vedas contain many ideas which are sometimes a bit abstract in form, and most of our intellects are not developed enough or subtle enough to immediately understand all these concepts. So to convey this abstract idea into something more concrete and easily understandable, great acharyas wrote the secondary literature that we call Smriti. The second reason is the Vedas cover everything, and excuse me. So the Vedas cover not just this highest knowledge, but they cover all the Purusharthas, all the different things to do with the living and this creation and so on. And the ideas are often very spread out in different places. And the secondary literature aimed to systematically arrange them together. And Bhagavad Gita is the most popular of the Smritis, authored by Maharishi Vedavyasa, which you will learn. Technically, everything which is not a Shruti can be classified as a Smriti. So that's important for you to know, but we also give further subdivisions. We talk about, we can divide them as sutras, which I'll just talk about. We can talk, we divide them also as Puranas, which are mythical stories, which are used to convey a particular value or so on. People often confuse these mythical stories as reality. So when you look at a Puranic story or a Puranic depiction, it is just a romanticized depiction to convey a value through a story, right? We also talk about itihasas, which means as it happened. So Bhagavad Gita is part of a great itihasa known as Mahabharata, right? So after the Shruti and Smriti, we can talk about a third division called the Sutras. Sutras were something, again, written by the rishis. They're written in a terse form where the teachings are codified and arranged. So out of these, today, a Vedantic student and the Acharya is primarily concerned with what we call the Brahma Sutrani. This Brahma Sutrani gives logical support to the teaching given in the Shruti and the Smriti. It aims to satisfy our reasoning intellect and our logical thinking Hence, like we said, there is no need for blind faith at all when it comes to scriptures, and your intellect will be satisfied, must be satisfied. And that's really one of the main differences between what we see in mainstream religion today and spirituality in general. Some of the things we come across in these scriptures may sound unbelievable at first. We say statements like, you and God are the same, right? And a Vedantic student is encouraged to question till their intellect is actually satisfied. You're only required to have faith in scriptures as a source of knowledge, as a pramanam. So it would be pointless to question the words of the scripture itself. Those kind of questions we will not be able to help with. But any doubts about what exactly it is saying, you can ask as many doubts as you want. Sometimes the teacher might ask you to wait, but this would only be because there is a systematic way of revealing this knowledge. And sometimes jumping ahead may cause some confusion. And other times, I might ask you to wait because the scriptures are often given in a sequence which naturally generates a question, generates an inquiry, which the scripture themselves will address in the following mantras. Mute you all. So the Brahma Sutras, this third layer, reinforces what the Shruti and Smriti says with the Tarka or Nyaya, which means reasoning. And together, these are called the Prasthana Trayam. Prasthana means the way of knowing knowledge, and Trayam means the fundamental three. And this Prasthana Trayam is what a Vedantic student these days study. So from the Smritis, they study the 10 Upanishads. From the Shrutis, they study the Bhagavad Gita. Then they study the Brahma Sutras. You don't necessarily need to complete all these three. The knowledge itself will be received quite early in your journey, and it might be even assimilated long before you go through all these scriptures. Sometimes people just keep going, continuing to study this for the love of it. So we also talk about now, I talked about these three, and you might have noticed the text we're about to do, Tattva Bodha, doesn't seem to quite fit in any of these. It is because there is another layer called Prakaranam or Prakarna Grantha. Now, this was authored by various acharyas in our parampara. Several works have been written by acharyas like Shankaracharya himself, his disciples like Sureshwaracharya, Vidyaran Swami, and even today, acharyas keep adding to these teachings. The teachings as itself are carried purely by the Guru's Shishya Parampara. So no one adds something new to the teaching. No one's giving their own viewpoint of what is it that Shastra is saying. So the original teaching never changes at all. However, depending on the generation, these acharyas might use more examples relevant to the students today. And of course, every teacher will have their own style, own life experience to add even more latest examples which can speak to the students that they're talking to. So that's the point of studying these Prakarna Granthas, to convey the same teaching in a more modern language with recent examples to make it understood. Of course, all the original texts were in Sanskrit, which is hard to be understood by someone who hasn't spent years, decades studying it. Even today, but a lot of these Prakarna Granthas are written in Sanskrit. So Tattva Bodha that we are studying is written in Sanskrit. But it is such a beautifully comprehensive text that we still study today, but of course with a teacher who can interpret again based on the, the modern language that's easy to be understood. Some of the Prakarana Granthas talk of the whole cosmos of the teaching, and some others pick one certain aspect of the teaching and dive deeper into it. So Tattva Bodha is a text which talks about the whole cosmos of the teaching. Tattva Bodha is another such text. Upadesha Saram, written by Ramana Maharishi, is another such text. They give you an overview of all the key concepts. And some other prakarnas, Prakarana Granthas, talk about just one aspect of the teaching. So we have, say, Sadhana Panchakam, which gives you the 5 main sadhana, spiritual practices that is conducive for your growth. We have Maya Panchakam, which talks about the concept of Maya. We have something called Drigdrishya Viveka, which talks about the seer and the seen, and many others like this. So what I'll do is I will just briefly put up the slide to show you what we talked about. And if you have any questions, I'll share the slide with you so you don't need to note it down or anything. If you have any questions, we can take that about these layers of scriptures. All good? Right. Then we can move on. So we can jump to Tattva Bodha. What is Tattva Bodha is a text which is very simple but beautifully comprehensive. It is not part of the Prasthana Trayam that we saw, obviously, but it's a Prakarana Grantha with many benefits. It systematically gives the process of acquiring this self-knowledge. The author systematically also introduces many technical terms that specific to Vedanta that the scriptures will use. In a way, it's a glossary or jargon of Vedanta. So get scared when you hear jargon and such, but anything we study has its own jargon, right? So even if you just want to watch a cricket match, there is certain jargon that you must know. If the umpire says LBW, like before wicket, or no ball, that's all cricket jargon. Nothing too complicated when we say jargon, but if you don't know what that means, you won't be able to appreciate the game itself. So it's like that. Every field of study, every field of even art has their own jargon that we must know to familiarize ourselves with that field. So Tattva Bodha will introduce some of these jargon very slowly, so it's easy for you to understand the rest of the teaching. And also because there are so many terms which are used colloquially today in everyday language today, like say karma or soul, or God. We will all have our own preconceived notions about it based on our own upbringing, which part of the world we grew up from, who we heard, and so on. And so you must now understand these terms from Advaita Vedantic point of view to convey what Advaita Vedanta is telling you. And sometimes, like I said before, there are certain terms which just cannot be translated into English, not in a single word. So the concept of karma, for example, I can give you a long explanation to really help you understand what is karma, but there is no one word I can use to translate karma. So you must understand the word karma itself in its entirety and make it part of your vocabulary. So that's part of what we will be doing with this text. Tattva Bodha is written in prose form, except the first and last portion, which are both in verse. In this tradition, we always start with a prayer because we believe success depends on two factors: my own effort, prayatna, and the grace of the Lord, Ishwar Anugraha. So you can basically put all the unpredictable, uncontrollable factors under this second category and pray for the grace, Ishwar Anugraha, against these unpredictable, uncontrollable factors. So prayers are offered for these uncontrollable factors, and hence the author invokes the grace of the Lord as he starts to write this. So he says, Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. He starts with invoking the Guru Shishya lineage. And you can open the text that I shared with you and come to the bottom of page 1, which is called Mangala Charanam. I hope everyone got this text. So you can take a printout for ease of future use if you wish, or just use the PDF. Okay. So I will chant and you can repeat. You can unmute yourself. Mangalacharanam.
Mangalacharanam.
Vasudevendra Yogendram.
Vasudevendra Yogendram.
Nattva Jnanapradam Gurum.
Nattva Jnanapradam Gurum.
Mumukshunam hitartaya.
Mumukshunam hitarthaya.
Tattva Bodho Vidhiyate.
Tattva Bodho Vidhiyate.
Thank you. So going forward, when we do the beginning prayers, we will also chant this prayer because this is the opening prayer of Tattva Bodha. So what does it say? So it says, Nattva, having saluted, Vasudevendra Yogendram. Vasudevendra means the foremost of yogins. Yogindram, Yogi Indra. Indra, at the end of any word in Sanskrit, means great. Hence, this means the great yogi. Gurum, the guru. Jnana Pradam. So there are all kinds of gurus, right? So there's a guru who can teach you music. There's a guru who can teach you math. What kind of guru is the author saluting? Jnana Pradam, the one who gives knowledge of Tattva Bodha, the knowledge of the truth. And who does this guru give the knowledge to? Mumukshunam, of those desirous of moksha, of those desirous of liberation, and hittarthaya, for the benefit of these people who are desirous of moksha, abhidhyate is presented. So the author is offering namaskaras to the Guru Sishya lineage, and at the same time offering salutations to Ishvara, who he considers same as his Guru. The author is offering namaskaras to his Guru Vasudevendra Indra Saraswati, right? So a lot of this acharyas of our tradition, the most recent tradition, they will all have that is swamis. When someone becomes a renunciate, they give up the householder life and take up sannyas, the monkhood, they are given a new name, kind of saying that old identity has now died and they have no attachment to that old identity anymore. And the end of that, in the end of the new name they're given is often Saraswati. That's how you say which that all these Swamis belong to the same lineage. So from this suffix Saraswati, it is clear that this Guru, the Swami, belonged to the Kanchi Mutt, and most likely he was the Shankaracharya of that mutt. And some even say Adi Shankaracharya himself wrote this text. But the best guess is that it's an Acharya who belonged to the Kanchi Mutt. That's all we know for sure about the author. Vasudeva also happens to be the name of Lord Krishna. So indirectly, the salutations also go to Lord Krishna. And he said, the great yogi. What is the meaning of yogi? Yoga, as we know, has many meanings. In this yoga, in this context, yoga means self-knowledge. And yogi is one who has this self-knowledge. He's a jnani. And therefore, Yogindra is Jnanindra. I offer my salutation to this great jnani, to this all-knowing one, is what the author is telling us. And the author is giving us the reason for offering these salutations. He says the reason is Jnana Pradam Guru. He is my Guru who has given me Jnanam, who has given me this self-knowledge. Self-knowledge being the knowledge of the whole, the knowledge of the inquirer, knowledge about the inquirer themselves, right? So it is different from any other knowledge because it's not about the object, but it's about the subject. It's a knowledge which cannot be improved upon or negated, unlike knowledge about most things in the world. And the word guru itself means remover of darkness. Ru means remover or dispeller, and gu means darkness. And darkness usually symbolically refers to ignorance, which is why we light a diya, a lamp. It's done in this Vedic tradition. It's also done in many other traditions across the world. And when we do it in the Vedic tradition, it symbolically represents this removal of darkness, ignorance, through light, which is knowledge. So as a Vedantic student, when you light a lamp in the morning at your altar, that's the invocation you must do. We actually, there's a lot of things in the Vedic culture you see which have become ritualistic, and the original meaning of these is now lost, right? So when we talk about the festival of Diwali, and it's understood as the winning of good over evil. But what is the good and what is the evil that we are talking about? The evil that we are talking about is my own ignorance. And the good we are talking about is the knowledge which will remove this ignorance and liberate me, telling me my completeness. So that is the deeper symbolism behind this festival of Diwali that we all celebrate. And when that prayer, which a lot of you might have heard, we do it sometimes at the end of classes. Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. It means lead me from darkness to light, lead me from death to immortality, right? Lead me from ignorance to knowledge. That's the meaning of a prayer. And it's symbolic of what light actually means for us in this tradition. The author also said Jnana Pradam, which means who is the giver of knowledge, who has blessed me with knowledge. We have to supply that. The author is talking about Atma Jnanam, of course. And the author is hinting at an important point here in this prayer. He's hinting at the important point that he did not get this knowledge by self-study or by some kind of Kundalini awakening or reading translations in books. This self-knowledge was given to him by his guru. He's saying, I took the guidance of the Guru Parampara. Okay. And now he says the teaching is being imparted by me, is being presented by me. This for the benefit of those desirous of moksha. Okay, so that. Any questions about this Mangalacharanam verse that we just did?
I have a question. Which is the text you are referring to?
I sent it on the group, on the WhatsApp group. I'll resend it again. It's also there in the group description.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe someone can post it on the group. Any one person? Right now? But I'll send it after. Okay.
Thank you.
So we can maybe just take the first verse or so. Do most of you have the text? Otherwise, I'll find it and just send it right now.
Yes, we have.
Okay. Can someone send it in the chat box here, please? Yes.
We have it now in WhatsApp group now.
Okay, cool. All right. You can all open it from there then. Okay, so coming to page 2 of the text. You can unmute yourself and repeat after me. Atha sadhana chatushtaya vicharaha.
Vichara
Sadhana chatushtaya sampannadikarinam moksha sadhana bhutam tattva viveka prakaranam. Sorry, tattva viveka prakaram vakshamaham. Very quickly, we see the beauty of this text, how very systematic in this text is. In one line, the author crisply tells us all we need to know about the text. What is the subject matter of the text? What is the benefit of this text? The purpose for whom this text is directed at, the target group, and what is being taught. Right? So it tells us Tattva Viveka, is the self-analysis or self-inquiry. Tattva Viveka Prakaranam. So this is for the inquiry into this self-knowledge. That is the purpose of this text. Sorry, that is the what is being. Second, let's come from the top actually. So sadhana chatushtaya sampanna adhikarina. So that this tells us that okay, one thing to know about Sanskrit is there are several case endings, right? So just with the way a particular way word is given, it tells us if it is the subject, object, it is the location, or it is in relationship to something and all that. So it gives a lot of flexibility to that Sanskrit language, which means it might not always be written in a way we're used to reading sentences in English. So say you want to say, I read a book, Spandana reads a book, right? So in Sanskrit, there would be a case ending for Spandana, which lets me know that Spandana is the subject. There will be a case ending for the book, which will let me know that the book is the object of that sentence. And also I could just switch all those things, and someone who knows Sanskrit will still know what is the subject, what is the object of that. Which is why this sometimes when I'm telling you things, they might not be in the order the words come, right? But someone who knows Sanskrit can still read the sentence and make perfect sense of what it's saying. So just a brief introduction about what Sanskrit is, if you've not studied it. Right. So that's why it says, when he says sadhana chatushtaya sampanna, he's talking about who is this knowledge for. And the author tells us that this particular knowledge is for someone who has sadhana chatushtaya, that is qualifications of a person seeking this study. That's actually the first section of Tattva Bodha that we would be entering. To study anything, you need a particular kind of qualification, right? To do, say, a master's in engineering, you need to have had a undergraduate degree in engineering. To do a PhD, you must have a master's and so on. So similarly, it's with this receiving this self-knowledge, there's a certain level of qualifications which is required for this self-knowledge to be given to you. Otherwise, the same thing would happen if you entered the master's without a bachelor's, which is you will not understand any of it. So the first section will talk about sadhana chatushtaya, the qualifications of the person seeking this knowledge. Then the second section of Tattva Bodha will talk about vyashti vichara, the analysis of the microcosm or the individual. We call jivatma. And then the third section of this Tattva Bodha will give you an analysis of the samashti vichara, the analysis of the macrocosm of the universe, this creation that we see, and that we also refer to as Paramatma. And the fourth section will talk about Aikya Vichara, the oneness between this individual and the cosmos. And finally, it will talk about the benefits. Does anyone have a question? Meeting you all again. Right, so that's the sections of Tattva Bodha. Coming back to this, what the verse itself says. It says, so sadhana chatushtaya sampanna adhikarina. So this text is meant for the people who have these qualifications. They're the target group, we say in marketing. So it's kind of useless to direct something, any message at someone who's not the target group. For example, I won't try to sell shampoo to a bald person. That would not be very useful use of my time. Or I will not try to sell dog treats to a person who does not have a dog at home, right? So the target group are people who have these qualifications and are interested in this knowledge. That interest itself kind of, we will talk about it later more, but that interest itself shows you have some of these qualifications, right? And moksha sadhana bhutam. So those who, and what that word tells us, what is the compound word tells us, what is the purpose of this text? The purpose of this text is to give moksha, is to give liberation. And that's the purpose of any Vedantic text. It might, when we look at it, parts of it might be telling us about, especially when you look at Bhagavad Gita later on, parts of it might be telling us about values, how to live a good life, how to achieve particular things, the right way of doing things and all. But we have to remember, and of course, there will be sub-benefits along the way. You might achieve more peace of mind, you might achieve happiness, you might, all those other benefits we talked about, you might achieve efficiency in what you're doing. And initially, a lot of people come to this teaching for these various benefits. So myself, when I first came to this teaching, yes, it was answering a lot of questions I had. But my initial hook was really, it was all about human psychology. I was listening to these teachings, I was applying these teachings, and I found myself more peaceful and more happy, so I was like, bring it on, why not? Having moksha as a goal, let's say, came much later. Wanting liberation came much later. But the end purpose of all this teaching is for moksha sadhana bhutam, for achieving liberation. And tattva viveka prakarana. So viveka is discernment. And so this is given as a method of analysis, a method of discerning the truth. Vyakshamaha, here it is present. So putting it all together, the method of self-analysis is the subject matter. Of course, we can safely assume that the inquiry into the self will lead to knowledge of the self. At the end of this, you will get to know yourself. You will know who you are. Some of you might already say you have a fairly good idea of who you are, but if this knowledge has not come from scripture, it is subject to defects and limitations of our senses, of our intellect, of what can be perceived. And the scriptures will give you knowledge of yourselves, which is aprameya, not subject to perception at all. And the benefit, we talked about all those 5 benefits we talked about in the first class: Jnana nivritti, Vidyananda prapti, Karpanna nivritti, Agata nivritti, and Dakshata prapti. So all these benefits in full measure, what we call moksha, is the benefit or purpose of this text. The target audience, the eligible students, the prepared students who have what we call sadhana chatushtaya, that's who this text is being talked about. And so the simple translation of this prose is, I'm imparting self-knowledge for the qualified people. I'm communicating, transferring the knowledge. That's any questions? Almost everything mentioned in this one prose is the sections of Tattva Bodha. So we will go into each section in a lot of detail.
So it means the four qualifications are required to study Tattva Bodha?
Yes. So we will get into the qualifications in the next section. So they're required to study, it's not to be understood as a barrier to studying Tattva Bodha. But as we go through the qualifications, we'll all find that you have these qualifications in some degree, if not to the whole. For someone who has these qualifications in whole is when the benefit can be attained. The benefit is moksha, liberation. That benefit is only available for someone who has these qualifications in full. Otherwise, most of us will probably finish this text and not yet be liberated. Okay. But the process of even knowing these qualifications, you will see, will tell you how to get these qualifications and help you in getting these qualifications. So it's useful to hear about them and talk about them for that reason too. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So let's do the next verse. Sadhana chatushtayam kim.
Sadhana chatushtam kyam.
Kim
Nitya vastu vivekaha.
Nitya
Nitya
vastu
vastu
vivekaha.
Iha mutrartha phal. Iha mutrartha.
Iha
Muktartha
Phalabhoga.
Phalabhoga
Viragaha.
Viragaha
Samadhi.
Samadhi
Shatka sampattihi.
Sakta sampattihi
Sampattihi
Mumukshutvam cheti.
Mumukshutvam
Mumukshutvam
jeti.
cheti.
So this verse is introducing what are the qualifications. It's just giving us the names of these qualifications, and it will explain in detail what these qualifications are by them. So you'll notice that this whole text is going in a question and answer format. So we have to imagine an imaginary student and the teacher here. So the imaginary student asks now, sadhana chatushtayam kim? What is sadhana chatushtaya? And the teacher answers. Most Vedantic texts go in this format, question and answer. This is also to convey a very subtle point. A question is taken as permission by the teacher to reveal this knowledge, to talk about this knowledge, which is why Sanatana Dharma, what we know as Hinduism today, is a very non-violent darshana, right? So it's a very non-violent way of living. It's not propagated. We consider talking about this knowledge to someone who doesn't want to listen about it or who didn't ask about it. We think of it as himsa, as violence. So we look upon, there is no preaching in this tradition. There is only when there is an inquiry, we take it as permission to talk, and then we talk, right? So even when you start doing these classes, at some point, someone spiritually inclined might come to you and they know you're studying Vedanta, so they might ask you, what is this about? Only then you can take it as permission to tell what is Advaita Vedanta. till then you don't even say that. And even then, a lot of restraint is applied. So if they listen, they look interested, and then they ask one more question, then you can reveal a little more. And if they keep asking more questions, then you can reveal a bit more. If they're not showing any interest, you don't keep talking. That's also violence. So now for me, that's why I either asked all of you to fill that form, or if some of you message me saying some of your friends were interested, and I asked that your friend message me directly. So unless the student asks directly, I do not have the permission to speak to them. Now, when all of you show up for these classes, session after session, I'm taking it as permission that you want to listen more, and I continue talking. So it's just a beautiful point about the non-violence of this tradition I wanted to convey. So the student asks, sadhana chatushtayam kim, which means what is the fourfold qualifications for attaining this self-knowledge, this Atma-jnanam. And the teacher replies, the first one is, so each of these are one qualification. He's given a brief. First one is viveka, nitya anitya vastu viveka, which is discernment between what is permanent and what is not permanent. Iha palaboga viragaha, iha mutra palaboga viragaha. The second one is viragaha, which is dispassion towards fruits, either in this world or another world. We will explain all this in more detail. The third one is shatka sampatti. The shat sampatti means the 6 jewels. And shama adi means those 6 disciplines becoming, starting with shama, etc. We will again explain. And mumukshutvam. Mumukshutvam is the 4th qualification, which, so that's just an introduction. Now, all I've given you, I expect that you didn't understand that, because all I've given you is what the terms are, and we will explore what those terms mean in the next 2 classes. So any questions I can take? As we're hitting 9 o'clock, I think we won't start the next topic.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah. See, whilst I'm listening to all that is being said, the spoken word by you,
Okay.
and whilst my brain is trying to assimilate and understand what is happening, you have, I mean, the discussion has already moved on to the next point. So let's say after the session, when I go back and think, there are some discontinuous thoughts in my mind. So every time I have to go back and go to the recording, to understand. But sometimes it so happens that when I'm, let's say, I've got some free moments during the day, I tend to think about some points, and somehow it doesn't get complete in the right sense, and my mind starts interpreting it in some other way, and then I tend to get a little bit more confused than I was to begin with.
I
So
understand what you're
other
saying.
way
Sorry, you can finish with that. Is there any other?
is there any other way of, comprehending this immense amount of information and knowledge?
Right. So one
Right.
couple of things I would like to say, Suresh, is one, yes, this particular class would have seemed, quite fast, and also the classes before, because we're talking about. So quite honestly, the classes so far, we've not entered the main knowledge yet. Okay, so we're just talking about a little bit of introduction. What is Vedanta? What are the different viewpoints? What are the sources of Pramanam? One good way to go back and do that would be, that's why the first couple of classes I provided slides. So you can go back, listen to the recording, look at the slides, and make sure you just understand what are the terms in the slides. That's all you need to know for now. Just the terms mentioned in the slides is what you need to know. So after re-listening to the recording, if you're then able to look at those words and know what each of those words mean, then the purpose of those class is served. And the pace will be getting a lot slower going forward when we actually enter into the teaching. And right now, this particular class might have seemed a bit overwhelming because we introduced many new terms without explaining them, because literally the terms I spoke about right in the last 10 minutes, we will spend at least 3-4 sessions understanding what those terms mean. So it was just a very brief overview, and we will be going into them in a lot of detail. You're not yet expected to understand what these terms mean. And does that help?
Yes, I mean, I'll work on that. So very good one.
So it was just meant to be an overview. It's kind of just an overview of what's coming. And the pace will get much slower now. We will spend 30, 60 minutes talking about each of these qualifications.
Understood.
Thank you. Any other questions? In general, would you all like me to speak a bit slower or anything like that?
I think you're fine.
I'm always
Yeah, the
happy
pace is
to-
absolutely perfect.
Yeah, absolutely perfect. Thank you
If
so much.
something
I
comes,
just enjoy the classes and I wait for these classes. Thank you so much for your precious time.
thank you so much. It's very
Thank you,
motivating for
Spandana.
me to have you, all of you, in the class, and I also love it that some of you have your videos on. It's great looking at some faces and not my own when I'm speaking. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Let me put I've been forgetting to put the end prayer on the screen. Let me do that. So this is a beautiful prayer. I explained the first two to you, but this I will explain after we're done with the entire Tattva Bodha, because it encompasses the entirety of this teaching in this prayer. A lot of these beautiful mantras like that in Vedanta, but even chanting them gives us a lot of benefits. So we will chant. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Om Tat Sat.
Thank you, Spandana ji.
Have a beautiful week, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandaji.
Thank you.
Bye.